Okay, after we have this guy down, he's just going to dry a little bit. What I'm going to do is use some of my white and gold. If you don't have, I've got a metallic gold. If you did not have gold available, if you have a brown, that's okay. You'll just use a little bit less and it'll make a cream color instead of a yellowy gold. But I'm going to put some of this white on my palette and some gold. And I'm going to use a flat brush. This is just kind of a medium-sized flat brush. It's a 5/8 inch brush. It doesn't really matter what size you're using. And what I'm going to do is get quite a bit of white on here. I'm going to dip it in gold. So I'm going to have kind of both colors just globby on there. And then what I want to do is just kind of create an irregular circle on my background here. So I'm just going to use this very, very technical technique called smushing here. And I'm just kind of making this circle, okay? And I'm just going to smush white and gold in here. And I'm not worried about blending. I'm going to cover this circle with smushes. Like I said, very technical here. Smushes of white and gold. Like I said, you can use a little bit of brown. If you want it to look like the moon, you can use a little bit of yellow. Make this your own. I'm just using white and gold. White and just the tiniest bit of brown will give you a nice cream. So I'm just going for a lighter color here where the light comes through. And I like to see texture in my paintings, so I'm going to leave kind of these gold smushes. I like that. I want to see that. I want to see the difference in the background there. I want it to look very textured. So I am going to wipe off my brush. I don't need to wash it because all these colors are going to blend anyway. And the next thing that I'm going to do is use some of this turquoise blue, which is just kind of a light blue. And I'm going to put that on my palette. Now, first, what I'm going to do is just add some white around here because I want that to mix with this a little bit. Right, so we've got our white and gold smushes in the middle. And then I'm just adding kind of some white blobs around that circle. So this is all very textured. It's not, it's a very free painting. It's not very detail oriented right now. So I've got some wet white paint around the edges, and I'm going to do the same smush technique here with my medium blue. And I'm just going to go around, and I'm going to smush most of my background with this medium color. So at first, it's going to mix a little bit with this white, and that'll give us kind of a light blue. Now, part of the reason that we start the stag first is because I want to go over his edges slightly, but I still want to see the antlers, okay? This will give us the background without that halo. So I'm just going to go around him cautiously. And then I'm just going to keep going out. So I've got some of this blue mixed with white. Once I go around in a circle, then I'm just going to continue out with just the blue. I don't need to wipe my brush. I don't need to wash my brush because I like all these colors to blend and move together. And I'm using kind of a lot of paint. The more paint you use, the more texture you're going to have in there. I'm being cautious when I get near my stag. I don't want to cover them up completely, but I do want to go over those edges a little bit. And putting them down first just prevents me from having to use that tracer on wet paint later in the process. And I can stop right about where his feet are because I know that's where my darker blue is going to come in. So the bottom and the top definitely have some dark blue. All right. So this is fun, just to kind of smush paint around. You don't have to think too much about it. Just have fun. Just do it. I'm just putting a little more of this bright blue out there. And I'm going to do the same thing with the bright blue. This time I'm going to start kind of on the edges where the color will be pure here. And I'm going to mix up into the lighter blue. Now you don't want the transitions between colors to be real defined. You don't want to see straight lines. So just have real kind of organic shapes down here. You don't want a big straight line across. You want variation in where the line starts and stops. So I'm just kind of working this up and then kind of blending these colors. Once I get the color across the bottom, I'm blending the color up. And then I'm going to do the same thing to my edges here. I'm going to put down the blue first on my right side. And I don't want as much blending. I don't want as much of the dark color on my sides. Again, this is just a preference. So whatever you're comfortable with, just kind of blend some of that in. After you lay down the pure color, then just blend it in a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing here on the left. Apply my pure color. And tap it in. And then here at the top, I've got some variation in the way that it comes around, but I'm just going to apply my pure color across the top and then blend it into that lighter blue. And once you get your entire canvas colored, don't be afraid. I mean, if you need to add lighter blue in spots, you can go back and touch some in. If you want more dark blue, you can touch some in. This is totally yours. If you used a lot of paint like I did, it should continue to be wet for a little while and it'll blend pretty easily. So I think this technique is fun, just to kind of smush the colors around. There's no right or wrong. I'm going to add some more. I don't like the way this is blending out right here, so I'm going to add a little more of this light blue in, just to help with some of that blending. But our paintings are all going to look very different, so do it however you like. You might even go back here and just blend a little bit of this out as well. There's no right or wrong here. I think sometimes it's harder just to be loose and kind of crazy with it than it is to be, you know, very smooth and specific with your lines. So if you struggle with that a little bit, that is common. I've been painting for years and years, and sometimes that's hard for me just to let go, because right now I look at this and I'm like, ooh, it's all over the place, but that's okay because we have a few more layers to add on top of it. So I'm just gonna lift this up so you can see. When you look at it closely, there is a lot of texture. Don't forget that once you are finished with your piece, with your painting, you are not going to be, you know, 6 to 12 inches from it. If you hang it up, if you have it on your wall, you're going to step back a little bit. So if you're a little nervous about it, just step away a little bit and see if the distance helps. Now we've got a nice thick coat of background paint on here. So we are going to take about a 5-minute break here. This is a good time for you to get a drink, stretch, have a bathroom break. I'm going to step away and get a refill on my water. And that'll give this painting a little time to dry slightly. It doesn't have to dry completely, but get up, move around, and I'll meet you back here in about 5 minutes. Okay, guys, I'm back. I'm ready to start the second layer, which is going to be tree trunks. I like to use, when I paint, you know, this is my sample here, but I included it on your supply list. So don't be afraid to reference that if you kind of need to see an example other than on camera here. Because even though this is my painting, I'm still using my supply list to reference what I'm doing. But next we're going to add some of these trees. And if you look closely, there are 2 different colors of trees. And by using a lighter blue and a darker blue, we give the impression of depth to our painting. So the first color that I'm going to use is a little bit of my medium blue or my light blue here, my turquoise blue. And I might mix it with a little bit of white. And I'm just going to use one of my smallest paintbrushes. Mix up this color a little bit first. I'm just going to get a lighter shade of this medium, or I don't know what to call it, this turquoise blue. I'm going to make a lighter shade of that. I just want it to be a little lighter than what I've got here. And you know, this painting doesn't really exist anywhere but in my head, so don't feel like you have to do it exactly like I'm doing it. But I'm just mixing up a color. Now I want the paint on my brush to be nice and thin. If you want to water it down a little bit, you can. When you're working with fine lines, the thinner the paint, the easier it is. So if your paint feels kind of clumpy, just add a touch of water. We don't need thick transparency here. So the thinner your brush, the thinner your paint is usually helpful. Okay, so I've got a nice blue color mixed up here, and these are going to be the trees in my far background. So I'm going to get a nice covering on my paintbrush here. I've just got a thin liner brush. You can use a thin round brush. We're going to go very lightly with just the tip of our brush, and I'm going to hold my brush up at the top. That gives me less control. So when I make my tree line, it's gonna kind of do its own thing a little bit here. So what I'm gonna do is just start here in this medium light blue, and I'm gonna pull a tree trunk up. Now this line isn't perfect, that's okay. Once I get my center line for my tree trunk, I can just add a few branches out. Right here through the middle, my gold and white is not completely dry. That's okay. And I'm just going to add several of these in there. If I don't get a complete line, you can go back and touch up. Don't feel like you have to. We're just giving kind of this whimsical tree background. You don't need to see every little every little branch, every little aspect of every tree. That's okay. I'm just going to add a few of these in here. You can add as many of the light blue trees as you want. Make some thicker, some thinner. Sometimes I like to go back and just make my trunks a little thicker. Just the main trunk sometimes. But I am not being very technical with these trees. I'm just letting them do their own thing. And then once we have, now I put in three light trees in my background. And now I'm going to put 3 or 4. I'm not sure how many dark trees again, I'm just going to pull some of this color. I'm going to mix in a little water so my paint is a little thinner since I'm using a small brush. I want some nice thin paint. That will just help me get those thin lines that I'm looking for. And I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to start down here where the dark blue is. And I'm holding my paintbrush up towards the top. And I'm just going to pull in a dark tree. It is lifting some of that background color, and that's okay because this is not a very realistic painting. We're doing silhouettes, so we don't need to worry too much about the color and the shape. Just let the paintbrush behave in its own way. If you notice that you're running out of paint, just lift your paintbrush and start your line again. You can do that as many times as you need to. And by having these two different color trees here, what happens is your eye creates depth. So your darker trees are going to look closer, whereas the lighter trees are going to blend in a little bit and look farther away. And just like in the woods, it's okay if your trees have all different shapes because natural trees do have all different kinds of shapes. If you want to add a few more branches and detail to the trees in the front, you can. But you don't have to if you like simple trees as well. Okay, well, I've got my fine brush out here in this deeper blue. What I'm going to do is touch up these antlers here. And again, don't worry too much about the shape that I drew because that only exists in my head. This is not based on a realistic stag at all. I didn't get him from a picture. I just made him up. So if his antlers go in a different direction, that's okay. And I'm just going to touch up the second layer on these antlers first. Since I've got this thin brush out. And some of these I can't see, and that's okay. I'm just going to draw them in. Don't forget, if your paint gets difficult to work with while you're doing these fine details, just add a smidge of water, and that makes the paint easier to work with on a thinner brush. And the beauty of working with acrylic paint is if you do something that you don't like, you can always touch it up. So if I didn't like my antlers, I could use some of that background color to touch it up. I'm satisfied with what I've got here. But you can always just let it dry and touch it up a little bit. And once I'm done with the antlers, I'm going to move back in and finish with the second coat on his body. So again, I've covered up some of those outlines, and that's okay. I'm just going to kind of eyeball them back in. And by adding a second coat, we won't see those paint lines in that blue paint. He'll be a nice, solid silhouette. Use whichever brush you're comfortable with. If you need to use a smaller brush so that you can get nice clean edges, that is fine. Okay, after I get my stag coated with the second coat, now what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to add some dots just to make it feel a little more whimsical to me. So if you look at your sample here on your supply list, I've just got some dots at the top and a few around the bottom. Again, optional. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm just going to take a paintbrush and I'm going to use the wrong end of the paintbrush. And I'm going to first dip it. Let's see, I'll do the white first. And I get some on the tip there. And I'm just going to place some dots. Now this is kind of a larger paintbrush, and so my dots are larger. So I'm going to just randomly put in some white dots. I don't want a ton here at the bottom. The idea is just to make this feel a little whimsical, a little magical. So I've got some large white dots by using a large white paintbrush on the wrong end. And then I'm going to go back and do the same thing with gold. Now I'm not overthinking where I'm putting these dots, guys. I'm just going for it. I don't want to overthink, because if you start to plan them out, it just will have kind of an unnatural feel to it. Okay, so I've got some dots in there. This is kind of a larger paintbrush, so my dots were a little bit larger. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to use a small, well, that one's not real small. I'm going to find a smaller paintbrush end. I think I'm being too picky. I don't think it really matters. All right, yeah. This is just a smaller paintbrush, and so the end is smaller, and then I'm going to go back through and add some more white dots. Maybe making 2 or 3 before I redip in my white here. And then I'm going to go back and do the same thing with my gold. And I'm not worried about whether it's over the background, over the foreground. That does not matter to me. I'm just going for it. All right. And then when you're done, you just wipe off the end of your brush and you're good to go. Now we are almost finished. This is the part where I put on some finishing touches. So I'm going to go right back to this. Primary blue. And I'm going to go back to my large paintbrush again. And I'm going to get a little bit of this primary blue. And I'm going to just add a few more patches of pure color down here. Now that the blended color has dried a little bit, it's helpful just to go back and add some of this pure color in because it will help his little feet blend in. And then, of course, if you've got a raised canvas here, you're going to want to do your edges. So I'm just going to add this pure color in patches down at the bottom and then paint my bottom edge. And little by little, I'm just going to go around the canvas like that. So I started with my bottom. Definitely turn your canvas so it's easy for you to work with. A little bit of pure color here along the edge. Don't overthink it, just go for it. And then paint your edge of your canvas. Now, if you are using a journal or a flat canvas, a canvas board, or something where you don't have to touch up your edges here, then just add a little bit of blue around the very edge of your piece, and then do some touch-ups if there's anything you feel like needs to be touched up. So I've done my edges. Now I'm kind of on the touch-up stage of my painting. And that is it. That's all I have for my winter Patronus here, my winter stag. If you want to unmute, feel free. You don't have to by any means. If you want to show your work on camera, feel free to do so now. Let's see if I can unpin myself here. Where am I? Where am I? There we go. Okay, so let me see here. So here is my painting. You can continue to work on yours. I want to thank you guys all for joining me tonight. I think that painting is just a real fun, creative way to ring in the new year here on the first day of 2021. I hope you all had a fabulous New Year's holiday, and I can't wait to paint with you again. I do not have my free February painting planned out yet, but um, I will have that up soon. I've been super busy because of the holidays, so please check back with me at the Painted Cicada, and I will have that up both on Facebook and on my website, which is just paintedcicada.com. And if you email me a picture, a photograph of your painting tonight, I will enter you into the drawing for the freebie this week. I will probably draw that and set that up tomorrow. So that gives you tonight to either post on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and tag me at Painted Cicada. Or you can also just email me a picture. I did email everybody this evening, so you have my email address. Otherwise, that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining, you guys. Have a good night. Can't wait to see what you made.